As time moves forward, as technology changes and grows, as the infrastructure of companies continue to ebb and flow, one thing remains the same. A leader has to produce. This is the Mosley Method Mastering Leadership Podcast, a transformational leadership approach that's centered around three core concepts: vulnerability, transparency, and authenticity. On this show, you'll learn how to be open and honest with yourself and with others, while also developing trust, empathy, and respect within your team. You'll learn how to empower them to take ownership of their roles and responsibilities. This is the Mosley Method Mastering Leadership Podcast. And now your host, Edward E. Mosley Jr.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Mosley Method Mastering Leadership Style. And we have a wonderful show for you today. I have a really good friend of mine, Dr. Danielle Lord. She's back on the show again and again. And last time we left, but before we get there, I'll let her come in and introduce herself, and we will jump right into the show. So introduce yourself to the listening audience.
All right. Well, thanks for having me back. I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. So my name is Dr. Danielle Lord, and please call me Danielle for the show. And happy to be back. And I am passionate about all things leadership. I am the principal of my own company, in which I do organizational consulting and some executive coaching. Not much coaching. I leave that to the coaches that are really great at it. But my whole goal in the work that I do and the work that I have done for the past 32 years in organizations is really to reduce the pain and frustration. It shouldn't be painful, shouldn't be frustrating, we shouldn't have anxiety when we come to work, when we're trying to run our business. And so my whole goal is to help you alleviate those things through a better run, better developed organization. So that's what I do. It's my passion, and happy to be back with you, Edward.
It is so glad to have you back. And our last show we had, I believe the title was, I believe you phrased it well, but I believe the title I came up with was "Sometimes You Have to Let Leadership Fail." Now, in about 30 seconds, tell us about that. How did you get there? Because when you said it last time, it stuck with me, and it's like, you know what? That's right. And I have actually been using that in several organizations that I'm a part of. And when I go into different organizations, I'm like, you know what? If they don't want to hear it, then you have to just let them fail. So in about 30 seconds or so, or a minute, how did you get to that concept?
I think that I got to that same place probably the same way that you did, is that sometimes when we are working with executives, there is so much ego that they have brought with them over the years. And as their position, their title, their pay, their offices have all grown in size, that ego has sometimes grown with it. And sometimes they don't want to hear what's right in front of them. The data has been presented. The best practices have been presented. You're there as a coach to help them, and they just don't want to hear it. And sometimes we just have to let folks go through that school of hard knocks, have the Band-Aid ripped off, and for them to go, oh my gosh, okay, perhaps there is a better way. And sometimes it's just that hard reality that we have to let folks come to that conclusion on their own.
Yeah, and you know that's true, because you want to help them. And also for me as a coach, you know, we're taught not to lead them and allow them to go down the road they want to go down.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it's hard sometimes, because I sit back and it's like, okay, you know what? I need to take off this coach's hat, and I need to turn into a consultant and say, hey, okay, you brought me in here. You're paying me to do this. I'm trying to help you, but you continue to want to go this way. So if I'm going to be your coach, then I'm going to go down the road you want to go down. But if you want me to give you some advice and I'm going to take off the coach hat, this is what's happening. And that could equate to millions of dollars.
Oh, yes.
It could be employee salary because they're leaving. It
Yeah.
could be just productivity because they're not producing. And you want to help them get through that point without those negatives. But, you can only do so much. And sometimes you have to say, okay, you know what? You're not hearing it. Your team is not hearing it. And I have to just allow it to happen. And then
Yeah.
then they bring you back and it's like, well, and it's like, okay, the light bulb finally came on.
Exactly. The light bulb finally came on once they had that really tough experience. Yeah, and you're right. The costs are significant. I was working with a small company, trying to help them design their organization as a whole system in which all of the inter-departments talk to one another and are not built out in silos. And I saw that very same thing happen when I was working with a startup company. They were a company that was run by a bunch of old engineers. And, I can say that tongue in cheek because I'm married to an older engineer, but he is fortunately a very enlightened, wizened individual. But there are a lot of companies out there that are kind of still run in that old style of methodology. I just wrote a whole blog on this, is that old way of doing things, that I'm the bull in the china shop. You're going to do it this way. You're not going to communicate with others. Don't respond to those emails. Those are things that are costing organizations a ton of money. So I'll go back to the story that I share with small businesses in particular, is that if I worked for a startup or was working with a startup, and that same old engineer mentality approach was very much in play and part of the culture. And the engineering group was told not to communicate with anyone. They created a fantastic product, a medical device that actually required more blood than any other glucose meter on the market. But the engineering group was told not to tell anyone that. So they got this product out to market. And suddenly the calls started coming in, and the returns and the emails, and why is this product requiring so much more blood than my previous product? And everyone just kind of threw their hands up in the air because they had no response, no explanation. So long story short, that completely decimated it, wiped out the company. They closed up shop. They lost their venture capital, and that was the end of the business. And that was probably 70 good paying jobs that left the community. So that old school mentality of do it this way because I said to do it, just isn't going to work for us that much longer if we want to have thriving organizations.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point. And we were talking a little, earlier before show, and I'm writing something that I'm probably going to post next week. But the crux of it is that old adage that we hear all the time is that's not how we do it. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the mentality right there that we're stuck in, or I should say we're struggling in this transition of thinking new. And I think a lot of organizations can handle certain parts of, if we're using Llewellyn, if it's freeze, unfreeze, refreeze, or whatever kind of organizational, model we want to use, organizations can handle certain parts of the change. But then there's certain parts of it that they can't. And I've seen where organizations will start this great initiative and they move too fast and they see some small results and then, okay, bam, then they let it relax and then it just goes back to the way it used to be.
Yes.
And so or you see some that'll get into all these silos and they come up with great ideas, but there's no action. And so I think some parts of the change they can take and accept. But then you have this, I think we're probably at the one time in our history where there's so many generations within the workforce.
Yes.
And so, I saw this happen where, and I was with an organization that brought in a lot of military, and they were younger, educated. They had just got the military, so they got a sense of career in the military. They got trained in the military. So they were really educated, some fresh out of college. And then you took a supervisor that had been in that position for some time and had been doing things a certain way. And let's say if that employee may have taken, normally maybe 3 or 4 days to do a job or task, and then here's this new modern energized employee could come in and do it in 6 hours. They looked at it as, are you being, being smart or so there was a, you kind of have to, do you retrain the individual, the supervisor, the manager in the current position? Or if you rewrite the position, and if they're not trained and you kind of rewrite them out, now you're legally bound. So there's a lot of structuring and moving parts to this whole entire issue. And
Yeah.
You did 2 books, so let's talk about the books. I know where you want to go, and we're getting there. I promise we're getting there.
We've got all kinds of tentacles we can dive into here, but yeah, I just want to finish the thought that you were having around that, and I think it's, I don't think we have to structure everything so tightly, right? I worked on a ISO 9001 project, again with medical equipment manufacturing, which is an international body of accreditation, if you will, to put it loosely. I was the change manager and the trainer on that one. And they taught us something really, really valuable. And that was, there are 5 areas in which you need to have really tight control. And that's around your quality, compliance, finance, customer experience, and a couple of other things where you just really need to have things really structured. Beyond that, it's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Make it however you want to make it. And so to the point about, we've got some employees that are going to take 3 days to do a particular task. We've got some that are going to do it in 6 hours because they're using new technology or whatever the case is. I think it's just getting clear within our organizations to say, just allow people that flexibility to bring themselves into the organization and do the work that how they want to do it, as long as it's not impacting the quality of our operations or our quality product.
Now that means that I have to be vulnerable.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite words.
To be vulnerable in order for me to allow you to make those mistakes.
Yes, sir.
I have to be. Yeah. And I think that's also an issue for some is we go out and I believe we go out and hire very talented people.
Yes, we
do. Regardless if it's lower, mid, high level. I think we really go out. We do a great job recruiting. We do a great job of pulling people in, but we bring the person into the position and then we stifle them.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more.
We put them in a box,
Yeah.
That's like me bringing you into my organization, says, okay, well, I just need you to type up a letter, but I want to check the letter every time you type it up, and you're a PhD.
Yeah. We see a lot of it. And I'm trying to kind of socialize this idea of role compression. And we put undeveloped managers into management positions, and they don't understand that that's a complete mind shift away from being an individual contributor and doing the work to now doing completely different work. And then we say, oh, now that you're a manager, we're going to put you into management or leadership development. So now you've got the brain can only hold so much. So now you're trying to learn new business acumen. You're probably booked into more meetings than you ever were before. You've got all kinds of different priorities coming at you and new demands coming at you. And we want you to go to leadership development at the same time. Yeah. So what do we naturally do when we get into that place of stress? We revert back to what we know. We revert back to that comfort zone. And so now I'm doing the work of what my team, those really qualified individuals that I just hired or I have just inherited, I'm doing their work now. So what are they left to do? They're left to type up the letter that I'm going to come and, put red all over. Right. And so, I think it's a real problem, and it does come back to vulnerability. It comes back to this place of just increasing stress and of the demands that we're putting on our leaders, and a myriad of other things as well. But those are just a couple small things. But this idea of like wage compression, we've got this role compression that's existing within our organizations, and we're not allowing people to work to the top of their capacity. I think it's very frustrating for them.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's, one of the things that I'm really focused on is, my research that I'm going to be doing is on toxic, how transformational leadership affects toxic work environment. And there's 4 areas that I'm really trying to look at. And it's going to be high turnover rate, low employee engagement, stress, depression. And I'm looking at some of those areas and, decreased employee engagement, But I think it goes back to your point again, is if the employee is not feeling valued within the organization, why should I stay there?
Yeah.
If the organization is not being flexible enough, and I hear this all the time, and I ask leaders, I ask them, okay, let's look at whatever performance appraisal system that they have, right? And some of them will have, let's say if there's a 1, 3, and a 5. 1 is substandard, 3 is average, 5 is outstanding. And I would ask them, pre-COVID, did you give any of your employees a 5? And of course, they raised their hand. Yes. You gave some a 3. During COVID, did you give any of those same employees the same appraisal rating, or did you increase? And some of them said they increased. So I said, okay, let me understand this. You had a level 3 that was average pre-COVID. During COVID, you gave them a 5. Now, why would you give them a 5? And they went down the list. Their productivity increased. They were more engaged. They just seemed more happy, blah, 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 blah. And I said, so now let's talk post-COVID. So if you saw your employee productivity increase during COVID, why do you need them in the office post-COVID? Well, they're walking their dog, or they're watching the kids during the day. So you're more concerned with them taking a 10-minute walk the dog around the block, or them watching their children, which is their own kids, at home while they are working, but their productivity has increased.
Yeah.
You're more concerned with that rather than saying, hey, you know what, they're saving $1,000 to $1,200 of daycare, or that 30 minutes could be their lunch break or hour lunch break. So, and we get, some organizations give physical fitness during the week. So that's walking. That's helping work-life balance. They're getting more work done. It's more quality. So
stimulating your brain too.
Right. So I'm not understanding, this post-COVID, and I'm in the DC area. And so, I'm outside the DC area, and there are a lot of organizations that have buildings within the DC area. And within those buildings, there's a lot of, vendors. There may be food vendors, clothes vendors, or even the VRE train, metro rails. There's the carpool vans. And with some organizations going to a more flexible work schedule, they're having to close a lot of the buildings and a lot of the vendors down. And so they're getting to the point to where they're mandating employees to come to work. And so again, is it all about the money that we're paying the lease the buildings?
Yeah.
Or is it, so it's about money. So what are we looking at? Are we looking at, it's more important to pay the rent, to pay the lease for the building? But if we don't have employees in the building, we're saving on water, we're saving on lights. We're making some saves, but so it's just this whole thing. So I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
In this OD management leader world conversation. What drives you crazy? What just makes you like, oh, why are we still doing it?
Oh boy, probably too numerous to count. But I think the one pet peeve that I'm really having, and I have had for quite a while, is when people say that they are a laissez-faire leader.
Yeah.
And so, a little refresher, laissez-faire means hands off. It literally means nothing. You're doing completely nothing. That is the leader. And we've probably all had that leader who sits in their office all day, doesn't emerge unless they have to run to the restroom or take a bio break of some kind. And then they don't engage with anyone at all. And they just return to their office and you don't see them again until 5 o'clock. That is not leading. That is literally doing nothing. And in fact, if you've ever studied the Blake-Mouton grid that was generated in the 1960s from either the Ohio State or the University of Michigan study, I can't remember which one, but they both came out about the same time. One of those studies generated what is known as the Blake-Mouton grid, where they really began to understand on the vertical axis the power of the relationship. Versus on the horizontal axis, if it's all task oriented. And in that low quadrant right there where the two meet, it was impoverished leadership or laissez-faire leadership. And that is known to be the least effective style to engage with anyone, be it management or leadership. So when people say they are a laissez-faire leader, that is no bigger oxymoron could exist in the vernacular of leadership and management, right? Because it literally means you're nothing. You're doing nothing. So that's one of my pet peeves right there. But I can go on the same diatribe for people who claim to be autocratic leaders as well. It's leadership is all about the influence that we have and the heart-based influence that we have with our team members. And so you cannot be autocratic, you cannot be coercive and a leader in the same sentence. And I think there's a lot of confusion with that, with the Hersey and Blanchard situational leadership model, where some people have to say, well, I'm either really super hands-on and managing everything that the individual is doing because they have low wills or low skills, or the individual who's high has high will, high skill, and so I need to be hands off. So I think there's a little bit of confusion there with the language, but that's kind of my big rant right now. When I see it posted, I usually have to have some kind of snarky response.
But doesn't that go back to just not knowing? So if I can count, well, I think I can count, but counting. There's roughly 12 or 10 or 12 or so various leadership styles, theories. And I think the two that you mentioned are probably created in the 30s or something, or the 40s.
Probably about that time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And kind of that, what they called the administrative era, which was actually very highly managed. Yep. And was developed by engineers, by the way. I'll just
and a lot of that
throw that out there.
Right, but a lot of that came out of factories and
yes,
just
it did.
And those employees stayed there for 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
So if that person is now 70 and they're running companies, they're trying to use that same leadership style and approach and theories in a modern world, where computers are doing, they're building the cars, vice, humans on the line doing it. So there's a whole shift. And so, going down that path, I want to ask you about one of my favorite topics, and I know it's one of yours. Let's talk about management versus leadership.
Yes. Another favorite topic of mine. And there is a difference. Just going to throw that out and throw the gauntlet down.
There is. And so, but if there is a difference, and I think somebody put it, I can't remember where I heard it from, but long ago I heard, managers manage projects and things, and and leaders lead people. And what I think we've done is promoted managers.
Yes.
We've
Yeah.
promoted managers that have been loyal to organizations for a long time.
Yeah.
And we said, you know what, you've been loyal. Let's promote you based on a promotion system. And we kept promoting them. And now it's like, okay, we have built structures that are, pyramidal structures. And as they stay with the company long enough, they have advanced up to certain positions of hierarchy. So now let's make them a leader of a department.
Yes. Yeah.
But they may have been great managing a $50 million budget, but managing people who are accountants that can do that work, they cannot manage or lead people. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that. Tell me the difference. Tell me your take on it. Give me your opinion on it.
Well, my opinion is really no different than yours. They are two very different things. And again, I'm in complete agreement with you that managing is managing a process or a project or a task versus leadership, which is really engaging with individuals to accomplish that. Sometimes the two have to be married. You have to have both because we do have to have ways to track systems and to track progress and to keep the organizational wheels on the bus, if you will. So we do have to have management. The trick is, how do we marry the two? And how do we get people to understand that leadership is not a title? It's really in how we behave. It's how we interact. It's how we show up with vulnerability, authenticity, and presence. And any one of us in any role, regardless of the title, can do those things. We can lift each other up. We can support each other. We can give each other a pat on the back. It does not take a formal title to do that. I would say the other piece to that, I have to be careful how I say this because I don't want it to sound negative in any way. Again, we need managers. We need people who can manage and keep, again, like I said, keep track of progress and make sure that we're staying on budget. But I think that that's easy. It's easy to do those things, especially if you're good at them. I am not good at that, so it's not easy for me. But if you're good at it, it's really easy to just stay head down on that path because it's a lot more difficult to be vulnerable, authentic, and present and to say, hey, good morning, Edward. How are you? How are you doing? How was your weekend? Oh boy, you mean there's a better way? I need to shift my perspective. I should be thinking that there might be a new, unique approach that I haven't heard about or thought about. That can be difficult. That can be challenging if that is not what you've been exposed to over time and where that's been a behavioral expectation in an organization. And I think to the point that you made earlier about these are 70, 60, 70, 80-year-old practices. Yeah. You don't have to be 90 and still be in that position when that's all that's been modeled and rewarded in the organization. Our brains are wired so that we're going to pick up on those things in which people and others were rewarded. So we're going to naturally have the same type of behavior and the same type of approach.
Yeah, I agree. And the one thing I do agree that I was, as you were talking, I was thinking about when we go into organizations, and I know you've seen this, HR departments are so focused on the titles of positions. And I think that's what we hire too. I can remember some federal agencies will say something like HR specialist, and then they'll say a HR manager. They'll say a HR chief. And I think we hire we bring a person in with experience to that level. And we don't start getting into this leadership, empowerment, aspiring type person until we start looking at positions like senior executive or executive level or chief of staff, or to where we know as a chief of staff, you're going to be kind of, corralling or encompassing or getting all the information up. And if you're the HR specialist, then you're just a worker. I think what I have noticed is I don't want to bring Edward Mosley in because he may have a doctorate degree. I only want to bring him in because he used to be an administrative chief in the military. He knows how to file. He knows how to write and correspond and communicate well. So I know he would do great at corresponding, writing letters, in and out the organization. Now I'm going to check him because I need to make sure
Yeah,
you're right.
yeah, yeah.
But Edward may have just wrote 10 books, so he may have the expertise to be a congressional writer. But we bring him into that specialist position and we put him in that box.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So I think,
and then we don't let them out of the box.
Yeah, yeah, and we're mad. We're mad when they leave.
Yes, yeah,
we're mad when they leave.
Yeah, just can't understand why they would leave. Yeah, and I think leaving is a good thing, right, for an organization, because the last thing you want is someone who is frustrated and upset to still be lurking and wandering the halls of your organization. I like to tell business owners, never underestimate the creativity of a disengaged employee. They can find a lot of ways to harm your business. And if they are frustrated enough, they will even go to great lengths to sabotage. And if you've ever been in the seat where you've been part of the investigation around some of those things, it is actually very true. Folks do sabotage, and it's quite unfortunate.
Now,
and I get another frustration, since we're talking about pet peeves, drivers, turn signals, bad parking, right? But also this idea that we're calling it quiet quitting now, when it really is sabotage. Yeah. And I say that without putting that responsibility and that particular onus on the employees, because oftentimes they're just doing everything that they can for self-preservation. Now, that said, there are bad actors, right? We know that, Edward, having done this work for a while. Sometimes there are just folks who don't want to play nicely in the sandbox. But I think many of our disengaged team members are just venting their frustration through their actions or inactions.
I agree with you, and I have an example, a real example of a sabotage, a purposely conducted, orchestrated sabotage. And the example I'm going to give you, it's a sports example. It's golf, but I want to show you how effective this employee was to the organization and to the golf course, just because he didn't feel valued. He did not feel valued. Now, and we can talk about, and I know this is a really small kind of comparison to maybe a Fortune 500 corporation, but when we get into the money, into the actual story of the impact that this employee has had on this particular golf course, just think if this was a Fortune 500 company, IT or car industry or whatever, the impact could go from, the amount that we're going to talk about to potentially billions.
Yes.
And then who, you're talking globally, who it could affect. And so the story, I won't name the company, the golf course, but there was a golf course that I frequent a lot. And they had a maintenance employee that was frustrated, and for whatever reason, I'm not on the staff. I was on the staff. I just golfed there often. And in this employee's exit, he sabotaged. He killed. He basically just annihilated the grounds of the golf course. And so I'm not sure if you're familiar with golf, but when you start in the tee box and you're trying to get to the green. And what he did to the greens is just something I had never seen. He poisoned it. The grass is just completely gone. And it's taken this golf course going on a year now to hire new employees, get a new groundskeeper, professional groundskeeper, to over the winter to kind of start from scratch, to grow the greens back. And it's finally getting back to the point. Now, let's talk about the number of members that this course lost. This
Mm-hmm.
course lost.
Mm-hmm.
They lost so many paid members to where they were basically giving their, allowing people to come and golf on the course for, $20.
Wow.
When it's
Wow.
normally, it could normally be $70 or $80.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just a non-member, but the membership lost. You lost. They lost tournaments. Organizations to
Wow.
come do golf tournaments there. And I remember this course for some time, and I think they initially purchased it somewhere around a couple million. But within this last year and a half, they have lost like double that.
I can imagine. Yeah, I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, and now this is you got to talk now. You had people still come out of COVID, so we're talking post COVID. But even during COVID, golf courses were probably one of the few sports or activities that stayed completely open. I think everything they shut down maybe the first few weeks or maybe the month of COVID, but once, because it's outside and you can walk, they didn't have the in the golf carts they will put the little plastic the centers or but now let's compare that to a a company like such as Microsoft or a big company. Just a disgruntled employee that doesn't feel valued, not heard, could be a toxic work environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just think of the impact that could be. That could be billions and billions, or that's global.
Yeah.
That could be global. And that's the world we're working in, to where as CEOs, are we working in this bubble that we just do not know, because our senior staff, they're telling us all the great things that we're doing. And one of the things, I was talking to another gentleman, and he was like, he always got out and went around as the CEO to the various departments, to the wherever the satellite offices were, to have conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that gets us back into this: are we managers or are we leaders?
Yeah. Yeah, I wish we would start to think of the CEO title instead of the Chief Executive Officer more as the Chief Engagement Officer, because that really, again, that gets back to that role compression, right? If you've got the CEO who's got his hands into everything, how is that impacting the vice presidents and then the senior directors, et cetera? The whole goal and role of the CEO, from Danielle's perspective, is to be out keeping everyone super excited, keeping them focused on the mission, inquiring with them. I've got two stories, two hospitals where I was a director and actively engaged in the employee engagement strategy. In fact, this was my failure story, Edward. It was with executive directors or CEOs of the hospitals who had actually at one time been very engaged and been that CEO, where they were out and they were connecting with people and they were keeping everyone excited. They knew their names, they knew their spouses' names, and they just walked the halls without that CEO name badge, right? And when those individuals left and brought somebody else in who had this is business, I don't engage with the employees, we saw those engagement scores tank by 50, 60%. We're not talking 1 to 2 points. We're talking 50 or 60 percentage points on the scale overall. So your employee engagement scores are going to tank in really big ways, and it's going to take potentially years to build them back up to the levels where they were at. And so, yeah, it's a real thing. People notice it, and there's a real loss. I think I had, in addition to being involved with the hospital and their engagement, I actually had several team members in my classes when I was teaching graduate level leadership. And they still talked about the loss, the sense of real loss and the grief around that, of how it went from being this amazing place to work where everyone was happy and felt encouraged and engaged to experiencing that loss. So it's a very real thing.
Yeah. I worked at an organization, and this was the only time that that we had what I felt was this high performing, just rock star, knock it out the park team. It was four of us, and I mean, we took a, so we were the workforce development side of this team, and there was an OD side of the team, and we was just doing some extraordinary things, and we were bringing some training and development to the organization, and they were just so happy. Um, Employee engagement went up. Our registrations for some of the classes went from maybe getting 20 people to having a wait list and needing to go from one class to three offerings of the class.
Wow.
And so it just completely went up. And the engagement of the type of classes that we brought in, either a facilitated, or we brought speakers in or facilitators in, it completely just went up 200, 300, 400%. And I can remember our supervisor coming into the office and sitting us all down, and she says, well, we've had some complaints. And we're wondering, like, okay, what's going on here? And she told us about some of the complaints. And some of the complaints were that employees could not get into the class.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
And they tried to register and they couldn't get into the class. And we had all the evidence. Well, if the class was open from 1 to 15 and they tried to register on the 17th, that class is full. And then it was like, well, this person is a senior person, and
Gosh.
So we had to start, so we had that thing. But the one thing that really turned us off, and we all left, she told us that we needed to slow down. We were moving too fast, and we needed to slow down. And I didn't understand that. How can you go from, having all this opportunity for training and development for the organization to, not having anyone enrolled in the courses because the courses were boring, and we re-energized that and revamped it and brought some great stuff in. And now it's moving. We did this for like 2 years straight. And then you say, well, we have to slow down, and so what happened was all of us left. And when we left, I kind of reached back like a year or so after that, the entire OD team left and the workforce development team left. And so it's like, who couldn't see it? Was it the organization couldn't see it, or was it the HR? Was it our director? Was it our supervisor? Yeah. And that just kind of it's something I think of, often. Now I'm working on some teams that are just awesome. And to your point, you talked about when a leader, a great leader leaves and a new leader comes in and the environment changes. Well, I looked at it also from the perspective of, I was with an organization that just was subpar, and I went to another organization that was great. And there's this balance that we constantly try to fight just to feel valued. And I love that word valued, but I think that's what we have to, when it goes back to the human perspective, we're all human. And before you get out of here, I know you kept getting away from it. I was going to come back to it. Tell me about the first book. We're going to talk about both of them, but tell me about the first book, Focused Moments Enhance Team Relationships. And there's more to that. What else?
So yeah, Focused Moments is actually, the history around that came from my time in a large Catholic healthcare system. And the remaining sisters wanted to make sure there was a strong culture of presence that remained even after the sisters had left. And so at the start of each meeting, we would have a reflection. And depending on the length of the meeting, the reflection kind of varied. So if you had a 30-minute meeting, you probably have like just a real quick little, 1 or 2, 3-minute snippet. There were some meetings with the executive teams where you could have a 2-hour reflection. depending on the situation and the events and kind of the severity of the conversation. But when I left there, when they left me, I found that the reflections piece was a really missing component in helping to bring that presence as you left one thing behind and came in fully to be fully centered in the moment with the next event. And so I brought this idea of reflections with me to 2 additional organizations. And so I had a file after 13 years, I had a big file full of reflections. And I thought, as I started to think about it and carry it into my own practice with Archetype Learning Solutions, I thought, gosh, this is a really missing piece, especially coming through COVID, this whole idea of connecting at that human level, like you were just mentioning. We're humans, we connect through stories, we connect by learning about each other, and that learning and those connections deepen our relationships and therefore enhance trust and rapport and all of those important things that are part of being an effective team. So that is Focused Moments. The second edition of that is coming out later this year, and that's actually going to have a mindfulness section in it. I'm partnering with someone who's a certified mindfulness coach to add a mindfulness section to that. But the next book that's coming this month, it's with the publisher now, so should be going to print in just a few weeks, is a book on engaging your employees. Just simply that, engaging your employees. It's 12 heartfelt strategies to drive your organization's culture and commitment. And it really is about all the things that we just talked about, Edward, about what is employee engagement. It really is a commitment to your organization and what happens when you have it, what happens when you don't have it, and how it's impacting your organization. And it's not an if, maybe, might, could. It is. It is impacting your organization, whether you have super highly engaged employees or super disengaged employees. There's a definite connection to the success of your organization. So trying to bring in stories that highlight, just like we were talking about with the golf course and some of the other events, what happens when we have a disengaged workforce. But the thing that I found, Edward, working with leaders in strategic engagement initiatives, was that most of them want to have something that's jazzy, sexy, expensive. It's a big deal, right? Oh, this is what we're going to do for employee engagement. Those things take time. They take money. Usually by the time you get around to doing it, your teams or the engagement efforts have shifted anyways, and whatever it was that you're doing is kind of forgotten about. Therefore, it doesn't have any real meaningful impact on engagement. What does have engagement, and what those 12 heartfelt strategies are, is things like being vulnerable, authentic, and present, sending thank you cards, having adequate recognition. There's a handful more of them. Giving the daily dose, which is making sure people are getting those neuro cocktail of chemicals that are dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. So all of those things come from here, the heart. They don't cost a thing, and they're easy to do. But it means you have to let your guard down a bit and be vulnerable to do those things. So that's the next book that's coming out in May. So that's engaging your employees. So.
Yeah, I love it. My 3 core principles that I try to live by, and I when I talk to various people as well, is I call it ATV, which is authenticity, transparency, and vulnerability. And I think that's another piece. And you've said it several times. As leaders, we don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to show that we don't know certain answers. I think I know that's where we mess up at. We should be, if we're going to bring in highly educated, intellectual people, we don't have to know everything.
Exactly.
We don't have to. And I think that's one of the big struggles. And to your other point you made, there's one thing I received from a supervisor years ago that has stuck in my mind. There's 2 things. One it was just a handwritten welcome note. It was just on a little piece of small piece of paper. It was just a welcome note that just says, "Welcome to the organization. Glad you're here. Glad to be part of a team." It was just it wasn't a long note. It was just maybe 3 or 4 lines, but it was, and then it was his signature. And that was something I stuck on my cubicle, and I kept it, and I think I still have it today. But it was just, and what I took from that was, anytime that I either bring on an employee or some type of engagement, I'm just going to do a thank you note, just a welcome, hello, just a small little note, little stuff like that. The other thing that I remember was, instead of maybe giving a time off award or something, or a monetary, I had a supervisor that went and bought these cheap little plastic gold coins. And it was just, anytime that one of us did something great, she gave us this little coin. It was just like a Monopoly, like a little quarter looking thing. Plastic, had no monetary value, but it was, and every time, and so the whole game was, the more coins you got, then she would do something like, a half a day off, or it was just something that she had within her power to do.
I love that.
But it was just little stuff like that kept us engaged. And as employees, we would, banter back and forth. Well, I got more coins than you. So it was a little game thing, but it kept us engaged. And it was something just as simple as, if whoever had the most coins, it would, could be ice cream on a Friday or something, just a pizza or something, just something, something so small. Yeah. But it presented a lasting impression. And it was just one of those small things that just, there was no value to it. But
there was intrinsic value, though.
Right, intrinsic value.
Right? Yeah. And I think that's really where the meat is around this. It's like, okay, clearly. So from what I heard from those two instances, those were leaders who took time.
Yeah.
They thought about you, they valued you as a human, and they took the time to show you that they cared. And that's really what it comes down to.
That's it. So let us know where we can get your books, and I will definitely get the information so I can, put everything when I do the post and everything. But tell your audience, how can we get in touch with you? How can they get your books? How do they get in touch with you?
Well, you can always call me. My business line is 253-269-2116. Always happy to take phone calls. My email is a little bit long, the things you learn when you start your own company. But it's Danielle, DANIELLE, at Archetype Learning Solutions. And then my website is the same, Archetype Learning Solutions is the website. And there's a very specific reason why I named my business Archetype Learning Solutions. That's based on Peter Senge's 5th discipline. So maybe that's a future conversation. But
yeah, and I would definitely make sure I put all your information where everybody can get to it and everything. So, closing remarks. What is that one burning idea, a concept that you want to leave the listening audience with, or even watching audience?
I think, we've been managing for a really long time. Yeah. Probably 800 years. I think that's the treatise of the next book. This really goes back to the feudal era, right? Which was really to keep the feudal system, the manor, alive, up functioning, and really to keep everyone safe. And that was all they knew. And so we've been doing this and practicing this really for 800, probably 1,000 years, depending on which time frame you look at. But it is time to move forward. We're in a different space. We've evolved. The manor now is the organization, but there are different, better, more unique and fun and humanizing ways to engage with our team members. So we got to flip that pyramid. Right, we've got to move from the top-down pyramid. We've got to flip it upside down and be the leader at the bottom who is supporting everyone through their efforts. So,
now you would say something that I want to continue going on. And I will say this, and I definitely want to get you back again, because you did bring a great topic up that I just love talking about. There's a study that just came out, and I'm drawing a blank on who did it. But basically what it talked about was organizations are going back to top-down leadership. They're going back to that approach. And so rather than, flipping it like you just showed it, where it's, the leader doesn't have to be at the top and have the final decision all the time. They're going back to a top-down leadership approach. So back to that pushing down the pyramid down again. So
interesting.
Yeah. Was it a Rand study? I'll get the information to you, but
yeah, love to read it.
It talked about over 75% of organizations are going back to a top-down leadership approach. So we're going back.
Interesting.
We thought we were moving to a more modern, more technological, advanced type environment, but for some reason, but we've talked about this. If they don't understand it, if you have that hesitation or that reluctancy for change, what do most people do? They go back.
Go back to what we knew. Yeah.
And so definitely want to talk about that. That's something that's just kind of it boggles me on, rather than trying something new.
Yeah.
We're right there. We figure, it's something I don't know, so let's go back to how we used to do it. It goes back to that. This is how we used to do it. So if it ain't broke, why fix it?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It is,
well, oh boy, yeah, and that brings up a whole other topic around the J curve. So we'll definitely have to reconnect. And
well, Danielle, it was wonderful having you on the show.
Thank you.
I know our listening audience is going to love this episode here, because I'm thinking so many ideas of how to, get this topic back out there again, because I think we could do this actually in some sessions and breaking down leadership and management, because I know there's definition. But I'm just wondering, when we talk about leadership development, why haven't we start putting leading change? Or now I know some organizations have these big topics titled leading change and organization and enterprise, but are we really bringing it down to where it's understood on kind of a instead of this pyramid type advancement, that every level of the organization understands how they fit into the big picture of the organization?
Yeah. Oh boy, that really
in small silos. So
yeah.
Definitely want to get back with you to talk about that more.
I would love it. Anytime.
So everybody that's watching and listening, we have had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Danielle Lord. And as always, the Mosley Method, Mastering Leadership. And we will see you next episode. And thanks for being here today.
You've been listening to the Mosley Method Mastering Leadership podcast. Edward E. Mosley Jr. has 30 years of leadership experience and is an ICF credentialed leadership coach. And it's his passion to inspire leaders who can foster a safe space where they can empower their followers to take ownership of their roles and responsibilities while sparking collaboration and creativity. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But until then, find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Edward E. Mosley Jr. To contact the show, send your emails to limitlessboundsteam@gmail.com. See you next time on the Mosley Method Mastering Leadership Podcast.